I didn't cry when my parents told me they wouldn't be at my graduation. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't even flinch. I just sat there staring at the wall, listening as they explained that they had already booked a resort. Getaway with my sister? In that moment, a part of me should have shattered. Instead, it became crystal clear. I couldn't keep waiting for them to notice me. I made a different choice. I invited the people who had been there for me when no one else had. I didn't announce it. I didn't send warnings. On the day of graduation, the cameras were rolling. The auditorium was alive with chatter, and my parents were watching from some distant hotel, convinced they had made a harmless decision. My name is Luna, and I was 22. All my life, I had been the quiet one, the easy child, the one who didn't require much. That's what my parents liked to tell anyone who asked. My sister, on the other hand, needed everything. At the dinner table, conversations always bent toward her world, her deadlines, her ambitions, her frustrations. My parents leaned in like people afraid of missing a critical detail. When I spoke, they nodded politely, their attention already drifting, waiting for the moment they could return to what truly mattered. From the outside, our home seemed inviting. Holiday decorations lingered long after the season. The walls were lined with framed memories, and the aroma of coffee always lingered in the air. Inside, though, there was an unspoken hierarchy. My sister was the sun. I revolved quietly around her orbit. College brought a brief burst of excitement that lasted only moments. "That's wonderful, honey," my mom said, immediately turning to ask my sister about some plan or project. I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs. I covered my own bills, rent, and textbooks. My parents never offered help for me, though they provided for my sister's car, apartment, and every little need. Once I asked for help with a book for a class. My mom smiled, said I was so independent, and I learned not to ask again. By the time graduation was approaching, I already knew how the conversation would go. I called anyway. "We already have plans with your sister," my mom said. She didn't pause. My dad added that she was under a lot of stress and needed them more. Neither of them asked what this day meant to me. I hung up, sat on my bed, and stared at my cap and gown hanging from the closet door. The familiar ache settled in my chest. But underneath it, something new emerged: clarity. For the first time, I considered the idea of choosing myself. Not waiting to be chosen, not hoping they would suddenly see me. I realized that being overlooked teaches you a strange lesson. You stop expecting, you stop hoping, and you learn to swallow disappointment quietly. Yet the sting never fully disappears. The signs had been there all along. High school award ceremonies missed because my sister had an event. College writing prizes met with polite acknowledgement followed by requests to help my sister move. Every milestone in my life seemed background noise to someone else's drama. I worked tirelessly, often late nights and early mornings, learning to stretch every dollar, prioritize bills, survive on little sleep. My sister casually discussed purchases my parents funded, as if it was simply the way the world worked. When she made fun of my small projects, my parents laughed too, comfortably, without reason to intervene. So when graduation arrived and they chose a resort trip over me, it wasn't surprising. Familiarity softened the blow but didn't erase it. A few days later, I found myself at my best friend's kitchen table, helping her mom fold laundry. The radio hummed softly. The windows were open and her dad passed by, asking about graduation plans. I hesitated but then told them the truth. There was a pause, heavy, serious. Her mom set the towels down slowly and her dad shook his head. "That's not right," her mom said. "This is your big day." They didn't try. They didn't even care. Her mom's eyes softened. She smiled in a way that made my chest ache a little, not with longing, but recognition. "We'd love to be there for you if you want," she said gently. Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't intended to say yes. I hadn't intended to plan anything. But in that moment, I realized something. My parents' absence didn't have to be a rule. It was a choice I could respond to. So I said yes. And once that door opened in my mind, I couldn't close it. The night before graduation, I sat alone staring at my phone. I considered calling my parents, explaining, softening the situation. Then I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing people who showed up. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. Life continued quietly. No dramatic fallout, no sudden calls from my parents to rearrange plans, no recognition from my sister. I stopped fighting the reality I had long endured. My family existed on one side of the table, my world on the other. The truth was, I had been building my life quietly all along. While my parents focused elsewhere, I wrote, revised, learned, and worked hard. Weeks before graduation, my manager pulled me aside after a long meeting. My project had exceeded expectations. There would be recognition, public, in front of my school. I thought of the empty seats that should have held my parents. I agreed. I didn't tell my family. It didn't occur to me. I filled out the forms and listed the names of people who had always checked in, who had noticed, who had mattered. Graduation approached. Instead of anxiety, I felt grounded. I pressed my cap, laid out my gown, folded it carefully, and smiled at my reflection. I barely recognized myself, not physically, but internally. I had shed the weight of expectation and neglect, and the lightness felt strange and beautiful. When my mom texted a photo of her resort view, I stared briefly, then set my phone down. That night, standing in front of the mirror, I realized a simple truth. Losing people who never showed up is not a loss. It's freedom. And for the first time, I looked forward to tomorrow not just as a ceremony, but as a declaration of who had always been by my side. Graduation day dawned quietly. The morning light spilled gently through my window, indifferent to the tension I might have expected. I dressed slowly, savoring each movement, feeling the fabric of my gown against my skin. My cap sat crooked at first, and I laughed quietly at myself as I adjusted it in the mirror. I wasn't the overlooked girl anymore. I was someone who had fought through years of invisibility, someone who had built a life worth noticing. Arriving at the auditorium, the hum of conversation filled the air. Families hugged, laughed, and snapped pictures. I glanced instinctively at the seats where my parents would have been, only to remember they weren't coming. My chest didn't tighten. I didn't feel the familiar ache of disappointment. Instead, I felt something new, anticipation, not for them, but for the people who had always been present. I spotted them almost immediately. My best friend's parents were waving, her mom already dabbing at tears, her dad beaming as though he were attending his own child's milestone. Warmth spread in my chest. Gratitude, not sadness, anchored me. They had chosen to be here, and that mattered more than any blood relation. Backstage, I lined up with my fellow graduates. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the first names were called. One by one, students walked across the stage. When my name was announced, I stepped forward, steady, composed. I shook the dean's hand and accepted my diploma, smiling into the applause. It felt genuine, fully mine. But the day wasn't finished. After the final name was called, the dean returned to the microphone. "Before we conclude," he said, pausing with a glance toward the wings, "we have a special recognition from one of our industry partners." My pulse quickened. I had been recognized for my work before, but this was different. A woman stepped onto the stage, confident and composed, radiating the authority of someone who knew her worth. She had been a part of my professional journey long before my family had cared to notice. She spoke clearly, the kind of voice that commands attention without needing permission. "One of our graduates has made a contribution that surpassed every expectation we had," she said. She paused for effect, letting the words settle in the room. "Her work has become the foundation for a significant project. Currently in motion." I felt every eye in the auditorium shift toward me. My legs wobbled slightly, but I walked up to the stage. The lights were brighter than I anticipated, but warm against my skin. She handed me a folder, and for a moment, our fingers touched, a silent acknowledgement of the years of dedication she had witnessed. This recognition is also extended to the parents who supported her throughout this journey, she continued. The room held its breath. My parents, of course, were absent. She turned instead to my best friend's parents, inviting them to the stage. For a brief moment, they froze. Confusion and disbelief flickered across their faces. Then, guided by my nod, they stepped forward. The walk felt longer than my own across the stage, the weight of significance pressing gently but firmly. Her mom's tears were open, unashamed, the kind of emotion that comes from witnessing something profoundly deserved. Her dad's proud grin never wavered. The woman handed them an envelope and a framed certificate. "A recognition gift," she explained simply, "for believing, showing up, and being present." The amount was stated matter-of-factly. Gasps and applause rippled through the audience. Cameras captured it all, the astonishment, the joy, the reality of unconditional support. I stood there, letting it happen. I didn't search for my parents in the crowd. I didn't need to. The night I had spent grinding, paying my own way, swallowing quiet disappointment, all of it had led to this moment. This was what showing up looked like. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled into the sunlight. My best friend's parents hugged me repeatedly, as though holding on might somehow extend the moment indefinitely. "We're so proud of you," her mom kept whispering over and over. I smiled, thanked them, laughed, and allowed myself to breathe fully. Then my phone vibrated. Over and over. I ignored it. I didn't need to see the screen to know whose names filled it. My parents and my sister, frantic, pleading, demanding. 78 notifications. Calls, messages, missed attempts layered on top of each other. I didn't open a single one. Silence was my answer. Later, we went to a modest dinner, warm and intimate. Her parents insisted on hosting, their pride and care filling every corner of the small space. Her dad made a toast, her mom squeezed my hand across the table. My phone buzzed again. Her mom glanced at it and said softly, "You don't have to answer that." "Not now," I nodded, grateful for the understanding. The story quickly spread. Clips from the ceremony went online. Local media picked it up. People debated it, some outraged, some celebrating. I didn't engage. My parents tried through mutual friends, extended family, even social media posts from my sister, but none of it landed. People remembered the small moments of neglect, the consistent absence, the pattern of disregard. My silence remained a boundary, not punishment. A few days later, my parents reached out indirectly, through someone else asking for a conversation. They claimed misunderstanding, demanded recognition for their roles as parents. I listened, thanked the messenger politely, and returned to my work. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they wanted the moment back. But that door had already closed. Life settled into its new rhythm. Meetings, writing, revisions, long hours, all of it was the same work, but somehow lighter, clearer, more purposeful. My best friend's parents checked in, not to request updates, but simply to ask how I was feeling. Sometimes I didn't know what to say, so okay was enough. Over time, the calls and messages from my family slowed, then stopped entirely. The chaos of expectation, the guilt, the resentment, they faded. What remained was peace. And surprisingly, very little guilt. I had spent years believing that love meant tolerance, that family meant endurance. Now I understood something far simpler. Love shows up, family stays. And once you understand that, it cannot be unlearned. Today, when I talk about my family, I speak without hesitation. I tell the story of the people who were truly there, the ones in the front row, the ones who chose me unconditionally. Blood did not define them. Their presence did. If you have ever felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to stand beside you, remember this: choosing yourself is not wrong. Closing the door on those who never truly opened theirs is not cruel. Recognition and support are earned by action, not bloodline. After graduation, life returned to its steady rhythm, but everything felt different. The silence from my parents wasn't empty. It was a boundary I had finally learned to honor. I no longer waited for recognition from people who consistently overlooked me. I moved through my days with a clarity I had never felt before. The weight of unmet expectations lifted. Work became a sanctuary. Meetings, deadlines, and projects. Everything that had once felt heavy now carried a sense of purpose. The long hours, the revisions, the late nights, these were the moments that mattered because I had chosen them. Each completed task, each milestone, was a reminder that my accomplishments were real and fully mine. My best friend's parents remained a steady presence. Each morning, they would check in with a simple question: "How are you feeling today?" It wasn't about results, updates, or achievements. It was about me. Sometimes I didn't have an answer, and okay sufficed. That was enough. Their unwavering support made me realize how rare it is to have someone truly present, and how vital it is to nurture those connections. Meanwhile, my parents continued their attempts. Messages came through third parties. Phone calls went unanswered. Social media posts were carefully curated to draw attention. They wanted validation, the acknowledgement of a milestone they had missed. I didn't respond. Their absence during the moments that counted could not be undone, and their attempts now were simply too late. I had already moved forward, my life shaped by those who had chosen to be there. I began to notice subtle shifts in myself. I laughed more freely, spoke more confidently, and allowed my voice to carry without fear of being ignored. Small victories, sending an email I had been hesitant about, presenting a project at work, offering advice to someone struggling, became affirmations that I was capable, deserving, and seen. Recognition no longer had to come from my family. I gave it to myself, and it was enough. Time passed. The initial intensity of graduation's recognition faded, but the lessons endured. I stopped comparing my life to what might have been if my parents had been present. Instead, I measured my growth by the relationships I had nurtured, the projects I had completed, and the integrity I maintained. My best friend's parents continued to check in, their care consistent and unconditional. I realized that family is not defined by biology. It is defined by who shows up, who listens, and who chooses you. One afternoon, a few weeks after graduation, I sat at my desk, revising a script for work. The sun streamed through the window, and for a moment, the room was filled with the quiet satisfaction of progress. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated, then ignored it. I had learned that my boundaries were more important than obligation. The past had taught me the painful lesson of misplaced loyalty, and I was determined not to repeat it. That evening, I met my best friend for coffee. We talked about everything and nothing: work, life, dreams, and frustrations. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to measure my words, second-guess my emotions, or anticipate disapproval. I could simply be. The freedom of being truly supported, without condition, was intoxicating. It was a stark contrast to the years of quiet endurance I had known at home. As months went by, my achievements accumulated quietly but meaningfully. Projects completed, scripts revised, presentations delivered. All milestones celebrated with those who genuinely cared. When my work was recognized publicly, I shared the news with the people who had always been there, not with those who had failed to notice. The applause, the congratulations, and the pride I felt were all authentic because they came from genuine connection. Eventually, even the echoes of my parents' attempts faded. The calls stopped, the messages ceased, and the pressure to reconcile diminished. It wasn't about revenge or resentment, it was about clarity. I had learned that love is not defined by endurance or obligation. Love is defined by presence. Family is defined by action, not blood. And once you internalize that truth, it changes the way you move through the world. Looking back, I see now that my journey wasn't only about graduation. It was about discovering my worth, asserting my boundaries, and learning to choose myself. It was about recognizing the difference between conditional attention and unconditional support. My parents' absence, once a source of pain, became a catalyst for growth. Their neglect forced me to build resilience, to identify my true allies, and to celebrate accomplishments on my own terms. Today, when people ask about my family, I speak freely. I describe the people who have shown up, consistently the ones who cheered from the front row, who offered guidance without judgment, who celebrated me without expectation. Blood does not define them. Presence does. I have learned to honor those relationships above all else, and I carry that understanding into every connection I nurture. If you have ever felt invisible to those who were supposed to see you, know this: choosing yourself is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Seeking recognition from those who consistently fail to support you is unnecessary. There is strength in acknowledging your own value, in surrounding yourself with those who truly care, and in celebrating the milestones that matter with people who have always been present. And so life continues. Work, friendships, achievements, all enriched by the clarity I gained through absence and recognition. The lessons of overlooked moments and unconditional support shape my decisions daily. I walk confidently, knowing my worth, grateful for those who have chosen to stand beside me, and at peace with those who never did. In the end, graduation was not just a ceremony. It was a revelation. It showed me that the people who matter most are the ones who show up without being asked. It taught me that boundaries are necessary, that self-recognition is powerful, and that the love that sustains you comes from action, not obligation. And with that understanding, I move forward unburdened, acknowledged, and free to live on my own terms.